Well, welcome everyone to this virtual meeting of Kensington and Chelsea's Planning Committee. This evening's meeting is held in accordance with government regulations allowing public bodies to hold virtual meetings. I'm Councillor James Husband, Chairman of the committee, and I'm joined this evening by 4 of my fellow councillors. Perhaps we can each just introduce ourselves very briefly. Councillor Bakhtiar, Mo, are you able to just put video on and just come up online quickly?
Good evening, everyone. This is Councillor Mohammed Bakhtiar. I am a member of this committee, and I'll be, along with my colleagues, making a decision on this application this evening. Thank you.
Great. That's great. Councillor Tom Bennett. Tom.
Yep. Good evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Tom Bennett from Redcliffe Ward.
Great. And then Councillor Idris. Wala.
Good evening, everybody. I am Councillor Wala Idris, and I am a councillor for Brompton and Handstown.
That's great. And finally, Councillor O'Connor.
Good evening, everyone. Charles O'Connor, Councillor for Holland Ward and one of the Vice Chairman of this committee.
That's great. Thank you very much. So it will be the 5 of us who are elected members making the decision on the case in front of us this evening. We are also joined by officers who will present the case and advise us. Now, the presenting officer this evening will be Sarah Gentry. Sarah, perhaps you could just come up on screen and just say hello.
Good evening, Sarah Gentry. I'm Principal Planning Officer.
Great. Thank you. And we're also joined by 2 of the senior officers, Derek Taylor. Derek, are you able to just come up and say hello?
Yes, good evening, Chairman. I'm Derek Taylor and I'm the Deputy Head of Development Management.
Great. Thank you. And finally, we're also joined by Amanda Reid, who is the Director of Planning and Place for the Royal Borough. Amanda, are you able to just come up online quickly?
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, committee, colleagues and members of the public. My name is Amanda Reid and I'm the Director of Planning and Place for the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea.
That's great. If throughout the evening other officers need to speak, I'll introduce them. Okay. If I could ask everybody, there are obviously a lot of people on the line this evening. If I could ask everyone, if you can please stay on mute with your video off, unless you are actually about to speak, that would be a great help in maintaining the quality of the line. Now, I think many of you will have actually attended one of our meetings in the past, and you'll be familiar with how we deal with applications. But I'd just like to emphasise that all of the councillors this evening have received the reports that you probably have seen, and also representations, and also the addendum reports that have been circulated. And I think there was actually an additional addendum report that was circulated this lunchtime with late representations about the case in front of us. So all of those things are part of the decision-making process this evening. So I think we can now move on to the agenda. First of all, apologies for absence. Now, I think everyone intended to be on this committee is indeed here, so there are no apologies. Can I ask, are there any declarations of interest? No, I think there are none. other declarations, I would just say Avon House, which we're about to consider, obviously it's actually very near where I live. So many of the people who've made representations one way or the other, and also some people advising the applicant, they are people that I have come across previously, and I do know. So I just want to note that fact.
James,
So,
may I just add that I also know some of the objectors and supporters.
Okay, Charles, I think we should note that. Thank you very much indeed. So I think with that noted, we can now move on to the substance of this evening's meeting, which is considering the previously deferred application relating to Avon House in Allen Street. And I think, Sarah Gentry, over to you to present your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So I've included here the location plan, just because the location plan that is included within the committee pack, the red line is an estimate, that a more accurate red outline is shown here on this map. You'll see the photograph at the top of the slide with the flat roof of the existing care home building of Avon House. This former home provided 35 bedrooms and has been vacant since 2014. You'll also note in the photograph the tree of heaven within the courtyard to the southern boundary overlooking Abingdon Court. Here we have the Allen Street context. This shows the position of the existing 1970s building in the street. Please, if members, just note the setback from the street, and that this front area has previously been used for parking, and there is no boundary treatment there. So, as you're aware, the proposal under consideration tonight is the redevelopment of the site to create a 46-bedroom home with communal facilities to provide 24-hour nursing and end-of-life care to a range of older people with a range of needs, including dementia. The proposal includes the demolition of the existing building, the erection of a new building with 2 basement stories, ground floor and 3 upper floors. It would also have a pitched roof with plant enclosed within this. As you are aware, this application was considered by committee in April of this year, and it was deferred to allow the applicant to consider amendments to the proposal to the massing to address the impacts upon the living conditions of neighbours in terms of the loss of natural light, and also to consider materials, in particular the use of render for the flank elevations. In response to this, revisions have been received, and the building has been set back on the northeastern corner at the upper floor levels, and rendered side elevations have been produced. I just want to draw committee members' attention to the 2016 permission, which was granted in 2016 for a neurological centre. That permission has been implemented and is a material consideration in the determination of this application. So here we have the existing and proposed front elevation. You can see the height of the new building, which would appear as 3 stories to the street, really appearing as a story higher than the existing building. You'll note that the cornice, the parapet level, would be no higher than the cornice level of the church portico, and it would respect the setting of this listed church. The front elevation would be a simple rendered high quality design with sash windows and traditional panelled doors. And there you'll see the image which just shows that, and you'll note the setback maintained to the street with a welcome new front boundary wall and railings to improve the appearance of that front forecourt. I'm just going to briefly go through the floor plans of the proposed new building, just highlighting in particular where the building has changed. So the new building will follow the general footprint of the existing, with the courtyard to the south, but it would extend at ground floor level to the site boundary to the rear of the site onto Adam and Eve Mews. And then we here have the proposed basement. The existing building already has a single-storey basement. The new one would really extend that with a further basement level below that, and that would contain mainly ancillary facilities, and they are outlined in red on this plan. And now we move on to the proposed lower ground floor plan. You'll note the courtyard facing onto Abingdon Court, which is hatched and outlined in green. To replace the tree of heaven, which would be lost, it is proposed that 2 11-metre high elm trees are planted in this courtyard, and then the bedrooms would face out onto this. Moving up to the first floor, the first floor plan just shows the layout of the bedrooms, each one having ensuite facilities. These have been designed in accordance with the standards set by the Quality Care Commission. And here we have the second floor plan. At the second floor level, the building would be set away from the rear of the site that is facing onto Adam and Eve Mews. And you'll see that the area to the top right-hand side, that is the northeastern corner, has been amended since it last came to committee in April. The building line has been pulled back to the north and to the east, with a terrace now provided at second floor level with a glazed balustrade. And moving up to third floor level, similarly, the building would be set in on the northeastern corner, and there I've included the previous scheme and with the main image showing as it is now proposed. Here is the southern elevation, the view from Abingdon Court. Rendered sides are now shown in response to committee's request to reconsider this, and it is recommended that condition 12 would require details of materials and also of the green wall, which is shown on that elevation. Here we have the models which just illustrate the bulk of the building, and that's showing the existing and then the proposed as a comparison. And I've also included there the 2016 scheme for your information, just to show how that appeared on that northeastern corner. At the bottom we have the deferred scheme with the terrace area at third floor level, and then moving on, you will see here is the new scheme with the proposed reduction, and there would also be a terrace at second floor level with a glazed balustrade. This is the proposed north elevation, which again is now shown to be rendered. And you will also note the glazed balustrade now at second floor level rather than third. This is the section across the building. It shows the plant within the roof slopes, and it's also useful to show the relationship of the building to the neighbours at the rear. At the top right-hand side of the slide are the windows of the flat at 16 Allen Street. And then the hatched in building is the buildings 26 to 28 Adam and Eve Mews. Moving on to the impact on the living conditions of neighbouring properties, a daylight and sunlight study has been submitted, and this has been updated to reflect the changes made to the building. The proposal would have an impact upon the flat at 16 Allen Street. The grey image at the top of the slide shows the arrangement of windows, and adjacent to this is the outside amenity space for the flat. You'll see that there are 3 key windows, which I've labelled on the slide, which serve the flat's main living area. The smallest window, which is W3111, faces directly onto the site. Now, there are 2 main ways of measuring loss of daylight when calculating the impact of an obstruction, for example, a new building on an existing building. The first way of measuring this is vertical sky component, known as VSC. And this is a measurement which really calculates the amount of skylight falling onto the vertical window as a proportion of what it would be under an unobstructed sky. So it's looking at the light reaching the plane of the window at the midpoint of the window. And in terms of VSC, this particular measurement, the loss of light to the small window, that small kitchen window, would now be improved. It would be less significant. There would be a reduction of 25.9%, and that compares to the previous loss of 40%. The other window, W2, would also experience a similar loss. The second way of measuring loss of daylight in these circumstances is no skyline, and this measurement calculates really how much of the room receives no direct daylight. It's a measure more of the daylight distribution within a room. Despite the amendments to the proposal, the living room would still fail this test, this NSL test. It would experience a loss of 54.1%, which compares to the target of 20%, where it is not noticeable. I should point out that this slide shows one room within the flat, and the other rooms within this property would not experience a noticeable loss of daylight. We do also have information on sunlight, including to the outside space, and that shows that there would be a noticeable loss of sunlight in March. Just moving on now to the impact upon Abingdon Court. The Sunlight and Daylight report also considers the impact upon the windows in Abingdon Court. It finds that 10 windows out of the 110 would experience a material loss of light when measured by VSC. And when using the other test, the no skyline test, 6 rooms out of 86 would fail this test. In total, there would be 4 rooms out of 86 that would fail both tests. And those rooms and windows that are most affected are those, as you'd expect, on the part of Abingdon Court that is closest to Avon House, at the lower levels at basement, ground and first floor. I've just included here the slides relating to 26 and 28 Adam and Eve Mews, because these, of course, are the properties, other residential properties that are in closest proximity to the site. But the Daylight and Sunlight report finds that there would not be a material loss of light to these properties. This slide shows the financial obligations. Details of these proposed funding and obligations are in accordance with the Council's guidance, and that's all set out within the report and on this slide. and there would also be non-financial contributions secured by means of the legal agreement, notably the use of as a Class C2 care home, and also requiring the submission of a revised energy statement. And just to sum up, obviously the decisive issues are set out within the officer's report. I don't intend to repeat them all here. It is, of course, a complex balancing act. It is not simply a case of balancing the benefits of the care home with the potential impact on living conditions. I'd just like to draw your attention to the fact that there are other factors that need to be taken into account, notably the benefits of bringing this unused site back into use, and the benefits to the street scene and the conservation area, which arise from the replacement of the 1970s building with a design that respects the context of the street scene. Finally, I would just like to draw your attention to the addendum report and also to the additional letters of representation that have been circulated to members. Those include the letter from the United Reformed Church, the Montessori Nursery, and 16 Allen Street. And then on a final technical point, there is an amendment required to condition 32, which should state the second floor terrace shall have the balustrade opaque glazed rather than the third floor terrace. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you very much indeed for that. If we now ask the objectors to join us, I think Councillor Addenbrooke, Councillor Siren, I think you would like to speak first. Is that right? Is that my understanding?
Thank you, James. Actually, I thought that Dr. Lee and Ms. Forsyth wanted to speak first, but I don't mind.
Well, that's absolutely fine. No, it's very much up to you how you do this. So, Dr. Lee, if you would like to go first, and I think also from correspondence, I think Mr. Akay, I hope I've said that right. I think you don't wish to speak, but you might answer questions if there's something put to you. I hope that's correct.
That's correct.
Great. That's very good. So in that case, Dr. Lee and Mary Forsyth, if you would like to speak first. Now, in total, among all of you, you've got 5 minutes. So if you'd like to start when you're ready, and then I'll give a warning when three minutes is up, so that you know where we are. But please go ahead whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, it's Mary Forsyth speaking.
Okay, Mary.
I'm not certain whether Nikki Lee wishes to speak first or whether she'd like me to go first. I'm happy to go first if that's what Nikki would like.
I don't mind at all, Mary. Please go ahead.
All right. Okay. Fine. Thank you very much, Nikki. Thank you. Just a moment, please. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Good evening. Abingdon Court is still faced with the same grim prospect of a massive structure with monumentally high walls. Nothing has been done on the overmassing. Photos and online images clearly show why over 137 of your local electorate, including ESSA and the Kensington Society, abhor this proposed development. It is an affront to a conservation area and contrary to your own council's policies. Council policies have seen a complete U-turn. In September 2018, the case officer could not have been faulted by us. No to a double basement, no to the loss of the Tree of Heaven. Height, massing, unacceptable. In 2020, all these are apparently acceptable. The only conclusion, once developers demand, planning policies are tossed aside. This is a disaster for the borough. It is in your power to right this wrong by refusing an egregious development. For make no mistake, whatever the latest addendum avows, what is foreseen is a massive ultra-luxury care home for very, very wealthy individuals, not the local community. Rest assured, their investors are looking to reap fat profits. Your predecessors in '94 saw the ills of an overmass building and refused. Councillors, tonight is your opportunity to not only repeat history, but also to make history by standing against developers whose raison d'etre is nothing more than financial gain. Deny them their golden egg by maintaining council policies and thereby supporting your electorate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm also speaking on behalf of the Kensington United Reformed Church. A picture's worth 1,000 words, as they say, so I'd be grateful if the committee could kindly refer to some photos that were sent earlier today. The reduction, which is only 21 metres squared, makes negligible difference to 16 Allen Street. I thank Sarah for pointing out that every single measure of light still remains beyond BRE thresholds. Only a single measure, the VSC, is now a reduction of 25% rather than 40%, which makes no difference to the light inside the room because the NSL, which is the measure of distribution of light, remains severely reduced by 54% compared with 55.9% before. The concessions are simply too tiny and in an inadequate location. Light experts, GIA, have helpfully indicated where concessions could make a real improvement, and I'd be happy to take questions on this and any other aspect of GIA's reports. An overshadowing report, which was noticeably absent previously, demonstrates that the sunlight that currently reaches my only outdoor amenity space will now be reduced by 100% at the recommended midpoint of the year, which is more than just noticeable, I think. Staggeringly, the church, a Grade 2 listed building, is not considered by point 2 or in the case officer's report. Light calculations like the VSC, like the NSL that were previously available, have mysteriously disappeared. I implore the committee to request these figures. They will reveal the horrendous loss of light to the church through their southern windows. They'll allow you to appreciate the severe harm that will occur to this building. I'd also welcome further discussion on this. It appears that the applicant has made the most minimal reduction as possible, rather than a genuine attempt to address the committee's instruction to make real improvements. I appeal to the committee to insist that this request is honoured rather than treated as a tick box exercise. I also fail to see how a decision can be made unless the harm to the church is properly assessed and quantified in the manner it deserves as a listed building and a valuable community space. And I would welcome the committee to come and see for themselves the harm that will be caused by blocking out the light through their windows. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, colleagues, fellow councillors, there's about a minute left if you'd like to make, I don't know, Sarah, Anne, who'd like to go first? You've got a little bit of time.
Thank you, Chair. I will be very quick. 137 objectors, including our MP and Councillor Siren. We all feel duped and the local community now distrusts the applicant. Having consulted again with residents last year, the application submitted under the cover of COVID was different, and this latest application has increased in size yet again. The development does not respect the scale and massing of the neighbouring properties and is contrary to policy and will make a negative contribution to the local surroundings, causing a sense of enclosure and loss of light. COVID has highlighted the importance of green spaces to health and well-being, and for those in care homes, the only space they have been able to meet their families after lockdown. The loss of green space and trees is contrary to council policy. Room size, ability to segregate and the design of social areas are now even more important and should not be compromised by a desire to make profit. This proposal does not reflect any of this learning. We do not accept viability only with increased beds. We have 7 care homes in the borough. The smallest has 15 beds, the largest has 77 beds, but has 26 vacancies. This application is aimed at the high-end market, which is well covered in the borough, and does not provide any affordable beds which are needed locally.
Okay, thank you. And would you like to add a sentence, really?
I realise we're out of time, but I would just really urge the committee to consider the impact on the church, which is listed and a thriving community asset, and it really is a community asset, and also to really scrutinise, what I think is a mockery with this amendment. I mean, it is so small and it does nothing for the residents of Abingdon Court. So please, I would really urge the committee to ask questions about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Everyone there, that's great. Now, I think if I can ask the applicant and their representatives, we went a little bit over our 5 minutes there, so obviously I'm going to give you the same amount of time. Mr. Henderson, are you going to, will you introduce everyone? How would you like to do this?
I will, Chair. For the avoidance of doubt, it's just myself speaking.
Oh, right. Okay. If you can actually, can I ask you just to speak up slightly, because you're a bit faint, actually.
Oh, apologies.
Just try and adjust things so that we can hear properly. Yeah.
Let me just try.
You try and.
Is that better?
That's a bit better, yes. Okay. All right. Well, whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, Chair, Councillors. My name is Neil Henderson. I am a senior partner in the planning and development team at Gerald Eve, and I'm the planning agent acting on behalf of the owner and developer Allen Street Limited. I am joined by Julie Darwin, who is a local resident and would like to support the scheme tonight. We have other members of our professional team registered in the event that councillors have specific questions and that they are better placed to answer than myself. At the Planning Committee on the 23rd of April, the application was deferred and the applicant was provided with 2 reasons for the deferral by the Planning Committee. The first reason for deferral was to amend the massing to address the impacts upon the living conditions of neighbours in terms of loss of sunlight and daylight, and this was principally in relation to 16 Allen Street. In order to address this, the applicant has proposed a significant modelled cutback to the northeastern corner, and this was actually in addition to a cutback that had already taken place previously in January 2020. So it's important to understand the cumulative impact of that. The applicant's sunlight and daylight consultants considered the previous scheme to result in an entirely acceptable level of light to 16 Allen Street, but clearly the new cutbacks will further improve the situation for Miss Lee. In respect of the second reason for deferral, this related to materials to be used on the external facades and in particular the treatment of the flank elevations. Condition 12 was included in the draft conditions within the previous officers' committee report, which proposed that the submission of materials to be used on the external faces of the building should be agreed with the council. The applicant has been and is still willing to accept this condition, and in addition the applicant has provided illustrative images which demonstrate the possible render treatment to be proposed. We therefore consider that the applicant has fully responded to the 2 reasons of the deferral of the application provided by the Planning Committee. We are aware that there are still some concerns from some residents, and you've heard these this evening. But notwithstanding this, there is also clear support within the local community for the scheme to come forward, with over 40 letters of support being submitted to the council. We consider the scheme will deliver a range of planning, design and other benefits. The creation of a new state-of-the-art 46-bedroom care home, the retention of the social and community use on this site, the replacement of an existing dilapidated vacant building, the provision of a new high-quality building that will better contribute to the street scene and surrounding context, as well as, importantly at this time, the creation of additional employment within the borough. The site has remained vacant since 2017, and the scheme before you this evening presents the only realistic opportunity to bring back a social and community use on this site. But these reasons, I do hope you will support your officer's recommendation for approval tonight. I'm very happy to answer any questions, of course, and I'll pass over to Julie.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Julie Darwin. I've been a resident of the borough for 21 years and a resident in Kensington for 12 years. I've listened very carefully to the points made by the opposition. I really have sympathy for many of their positions. Having building work next door or in the immediate vicinity can be extremely difficult. And clearly no one wants that on their doorstep, but we are talking about a site that is in clear need of modernization, and sooner or later, someone is going to do extensive work to this property. But I want to focus not on the aesthetics of the development, nor on the disruption caused by building work, but on the long-term benefits of what's being proposed. There is inadequate care provision for the elderly in our borough, and it is this particular point that resonates personally with my husband and our family. My mother-in-law, who is 83 years old, was widowed 9 years ago, and approximately 4 to 5 years ago, she decided that she was too arthritic to cook and clean for herself. She simply couldn't live on her own any longer, so far from her 4 children. Now, this is a very independent granny who was an evacuee in the war. She was sent to live away from her family when she was only 3 years old, as her parents were modern-day key workers. She felt she would be a burden if she moved in with any of her children. However, she ideally wanted to be near them. As a family, we felt it made most sense to have her in London near 2 of her 4 children and 5 of her 7 grandchildren. So my husband and I embarked on an exhaustive search of the borough, hoping to find her accommodation that would be within walking distance from us. It was at this stage that we were made acutely aware that there was absolutely nothing suitable or indeed available for her within the borough. I consulted with my GP, asked friends and neighbors, but there was literally nothing suitable. Our search even took us to Battersea, where we found a beautiful development, which was brand new at the time. However, most units had already been purchased off plan, and there was nothing available that would have been suitable there for her either. We came to a dead end. She's now in a lovely care home in Buckinghamshire, but it's an hour away. We miss having more regular interaction with her, which we all know is vital for the elderly. Lockdown has been extremely difficult for us all. Prior to lockdown, I was often bringing her homemade meals or taking her out for lunch. That 2-hour return journey means we see her much less frequently than we would like. There is clearly a demand for this type of housing for the elderly in our borough, and that demand is increasing, not decreasing. I'm in support of this project, as I think it is a duty of our community to ensure that we are all able to help families care for their elderly relatives. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. That's great. Thank you. So now, colleagues, it's our opportunity to ask questions of any of the parties here who've made representations. Who'd like to go first? I see Walla, I think, Walla and then Mo. So Walla, would you like to go first? And let's all make sure we make it clear who we're asking a question of, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My question is actually to the applicant. I have 2 questions. The first one is, are you going to be, is the building going to be carbon neutral? This question is for Neil Henderson. Sorry.
I was going to say
apologies. The building isn't carbon neutral, but there is actually a condition which relates to the level of energy, because it is an unusual use. It's care homes require a significant amount of energy, perhaps more so than residential properties. So it's not simply a case of comparing like for like, as residential flats versus a care home. There's a huge amount of energy required, but there is a significant amount of work has been undertaken on the extent to which energy saving technology can be used. And there is a condition in the proposed draft 106, in fact, to provide a detailed report of how those energy levels can be secured and improved upon.
Because, I mean, this borough is going to go zero carbon by 2030, well, aims to. So it makes sense that any building, any new building, need to actually keep that in mind, because 2030 is just around the corner.
Absolutely, Councillor. And the embedded carbon considerations were part of the design process from the outset. As I said, we're slightly limited by the function of what the use is, a care home use, and the extent to which heating is perhaps a higher impact than normal residential accommodation. But the officers have put in provisions to ensure that the applicant explores that fully as part of the design build-out stage.
Because, I mean, this is being built up. I mean, you're building a new building from scratch. So I was wondering, I mean, why hasn't that been something in the forefront? I mean, carbon zero, carbon neutral, all this carbon talk has been going on for the best part of the last 15 years. And we could see, all of us, that this country and the rest of the world is actually going towards becoming carbon neutral. So have you considered, I don't know, generating your own energy with solar system, for instance? Or, I mean, I just want to know, where was the thinking? Because it seems from your response, it seems to me there is a resignation that this is a care home, it needs a lot of heating, it needs a lot of energy, so we didn't. You see what I'm saying? And I just want to encourage you maybe to actually consider and hopefully promise that you will actually actively work towards building or look at ways of creating a building that will be, carbon neutral.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the avoidance of doubt, the development uses very efficient air source heat pumps to minimise carbon emissions, which helps to achieve the carbon saving against building regs of 14% when compared to building regs. So there has been, where it has been possible to include carbon saving technology, we have incorporated it. But as I said, in discussion with officers, officers are keen to explore that further. We are keen to discuss how that might be possible to take further, and that can come forward in the design development stage. So there is an opportunity, to consider that further. But certainly, at the outset, there was absolutely a consideration and drive from the applicant to consider ways of incorporating carbon saving technology.
Thank you. My second question is to do with outside space. And now I think post-COVID, we all appreciate that having outside space is extremely crucial. So you have 48 rooms, and which means you're going to have at least 48 patients. How big is your outside space? From what I've seen, it doesn't look big enough to have. You're going to have like 3-4 people at the time, or 5-6 people at the time. I don't know. Have you considered not, because when we spoke last time in April, it was at the beginning of COVID. We didn't, all of us, really realize how big the whole thing is. And I think now it's very clear that it's huge, and outside space is crucial. So have you considered increasing outside space even on different levels? Or if you can just give me an idea, how much outside space does the building have? for use for use for yeah.
Sure. I think it's probably there are a number of outside spaces that we've incorporated in some at balcony or terrace levels, and the area that fronts onto Abingdon Court. So there are generous spaces, but it's probably worth passing over to Adrian Pancott, the CEO of Kin, who will operate the site, because he will be able to give you a very clear narrative of how the residents use those outside spaces, and the extent to which this scheme in particular provides a very high quality living environment, both internally and externally. Adrian, I don't know whether you're able to speak.
Hi, yeah, hi, thank you, Neil. Hi, hello, councillors, hello, Chair. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. Yeah, I'm incredibly proud of this building. I think it will be the best care home in the country. There is a reality that it's been built in the heart of the Kensington community, which is where it needs to be, so people can be with their families and their dear friends and not having to move outside. And clearly, care homes which are built in the area are going to reflect the kind of homes which you have. So lots of people who come to live with us will come from apartments, etc. And clearly we're going to have terrific activities, and we'll be making use of the royal parks and the amazing facilities in the community. But we also obviously have a beautiful courtyard which has been exquisitely designed by a landscape gardener. We've got the terrace. And in reality, about a third of the people who are in this home will probably be bed-bound, because in reality, the average age is going to be 87 years old. And probably a third of the people will be people who are in communal spaces and so forth on their landings and making use of the kind of great room and things. And probably a third will be people who are going to be probably making more use of different things and going out and about. So it has actually gone through several senior people with the Care Quality Commission who think it's a terrific design. So I think we'd always, of course, love more external space, but I think in order to be in the heart of Kensington, I think it's a very, very proportionate and well-designed building for 46 residents to receive amazing care.
Well, is that that answers the point?
It does. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. Now, Councillor Bakhtiar, I think you'd like to go next with a few questions. Yeah, Mo?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I have a couple of questions to the objectors and one or two to the applicant. If I start asking Mary Forsyth first, if she is still there, which policies do you think this application is against? Could you name the policies, please? Are you still there, Mary?
I think.
Hello. I'm here.
Okay. All right.
I am here. I didn't know what. I'm so sorry. Yes, it's. To start with, it's a double basement. We are, of course, aware that it's an extant decision in 2016, but that was for a neurological rehabilitation centre, not for a care home. And I sent on behalf of Abingdon Court the objection 2389285. I'm sure you've had it, where it says that he is objecting to contravenes a number of council policies. It would therefore be inappropriate for the council to approve this proposal. Sufficient basis to receive an exceptional decision have not been established. These are the things that are worrying us. The double basement, it is contrary to council policy. This has been over and over again stressed by objectors. And that is one of the other thing is that it doesn't fit into a conservation area. We're very concerned about the height, the overmassing of it, the loss of the mature trees. These are contrary to policy. Does that help you?
Yes, thank you. Well, it's up to the chairman to explain and the officers, but just to let you know that the double basement is already approved and we can't do very much about it.
Well, do forgive me, Councillor, but that is exactly the point I was trying to make. You see, it is absolutely, we understand that it's an extent, it is an application which is extant, and therefore, but that was given under exceptional circumstances for a neurological rehabilitation centre. And furthermore, as I have just said, there are eloquent objectors on that have written in and have saying that there is no exception, there should be no exceptional decision regarding this, which is a care home. A care home doesn't necessarily need a double basement.
Okay, thank you. My second question is for Nikki Lee, if you are still there.
Yes. Hi, Councillor.
Okay, now tell us what we are going to make a decision this evening. How could we help you to be reasonable? Could we put any conditions to assist you, or is there, are you asking us to reject the application, or is there some way in between?
Thank you. I'd just like to firstly point out, because there seems to be a lot of discussion about the desirability of a care home in the borough. As you know, I'm a doctor, I'm a key worker. I completely and wholeheartedly support and understand from first-hand experience the need for care homes in our borough. What we don't want is a care home this big that impacts its local residents rather than benefits them. I'm also sorry to Julie Darwin, whose mother had a very difficult time finding somewhere to be. The problem with this building is its mass. Every square metre has been squeezed at every area possible. And the reason for this is to maximise the number of beds. I don't recall really seeing any proper viability studies or evidence that 46 beds are absolutely required to make a viable care home work. As Councillor Addenbrooke has pointed out, there are other care homes in the borough ranging from 15 to 77 beds, all with excellent records. My property is a single property, and I'm obviously representing myself for this, but what I really want to convey to you is that I appreciate the greater impact that this development will have on my neighbours and my fellow residents and the community, and that's what we're trying to protect. My home is merely a gauge, a seismometer perhaps, of how huge this building is. The reduction that has been offered is making a mockery of the process of the committee's requests and generosity in giving the applicant time to genuinely make an attempt to improve things for neighbours, to show engagement with the community rather than considering their own financial gains and needs. The reduction is so minimal, 21 square metres, Councillor, that the only figure that has had any difference is the one on that window that Sarah Gentry was eloquently explaining, that the VSC, which is the measure of light hitting that window, is reduced instead of from 40%, is now 25%, which is still beyond BRE threshold. No other figure, which is what you kindly considered at the first meeting in April, has changed. And the reason is because the area that they've chosen to remove, a room, previously it was a bedroom, is much lower. It's at the back of the building and does nothing for the actual bulk of the building. GIA have suggested and pointed out where significant reductions could be made to actually make material improvement to my side of the building. It does nothing for the residents of Abingdon Court. It would do nothing for the Kensington United Reformed Church. I urge you that the Kensington United Reformed Church has not been considered at any point in this proceeding. It hasn't been mentioned in point 2's report. It has not been mentioned in the case office report. If you go inside this beautiful building, you can see the photos that I sent you earlier. You can see the photos that were sent by Reverend Sally Thomas. It will change entirely because there will be now bedrooms blocking the light that enters their southern windows, which is ginormous Victorian windows. Not to mention that if you stand in the top of the church, I know you haven't been able to come and see the church, sadly, but if you were to, you would see that we'd be looking directly into people's vulnerable residences' bedrooms. There were, on the previous scheme in 2016, there were no bedrooms on that side of the building for this specific reason. It was considered. Similarly, there were no bedrooms, may I mention, in the basement or the lower basement of the previous building, whereas there is now. The reason that that basement was granted was because they were going to put hydrotherapy pools in there, not bedrooms. The bedrooms that are down in that basement open out onto this sunken garden. I'd like to point out there was a recent residential block of flats that was subject to an inspector's report in South London, where the outdoor amenity, given the importance of this during COVID times, as we all appreciate, as I've appreciated with my children on this outdoor amenity that is adjacent to our main living area, was not considered adequate for residents as use. I echo and would like to press on Councillor Idris's inquiry about the size of this outdoor space. I understand the applicant thinks that maybe the third, so I guess that's about 15 residents will be bedbound. They still need outdoor space. They still need access to outdoor space. In fact, they might need more space than residents that are still able to walk and mobilise, because they'll need to be able to be pushed out in their beds, which we have seen, and good care homes do offer.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much indeed.
I have questions.
No, did you have any further questions that you'd like to?
Yes,
yeah, please go ahead.
Yes. Well, two questions is the tree of Haven. Are you removing the tree because of the basements, or is there any way it could be saved? And the second question, the outdoor space is an important issue in here, because most care homes, they have beautiful gardens, green spaces for the residents to sit in, for their visitors and residents to use, but we don't see very much in here, which is a major concern. Could you answer this?
I think, thanks, Mo. I think that's probably a question for Mr. Henderson and Mr. Pancott as well.
Yes.
Maybe they would like to take that up.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. I'll deal with the issue of the Tree of Heaven first, and I think I'll ask Adrian to go back to the issue of open space and how open space is used by the residents of these type of facilities. So in terms of the Tree of Heaven, you know, it's an incredibly emotive issue. It's not something that we took lightly. You can imagine your officers tested us to really understand whether there was any opportunity we could keep it. And believe me, if we could have done, we would have done. But it is necessary to undertake works when, in order to achieve the level of accommodation that we need, you know, to make this scheme work. It does require additional bed spaces, and they are at the lower ground level. There needs to be a cutback in order to achieve that, which encroaches into the root ball area of the Tree of Heaven, and that has been unavoidable to not undertake that cutback, unfortunately. So it has been necessary and essential in order to make the scheme work. But I think it might be worth Adrian talking through the outdoor space issues in response to your second point.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, we want to create just the most amazing care home in the country. We want to have a home which is imbued with love and compassion and delivers, you know, incredible experiences to people at what is the most challenging time of their life. We want them to be in the, you know, in the borough, in the community, with their family and with their friends. And in the end, you know, care homes which have large gardens, you can provide, but they're in out of town centre locations. We are going to have this amazing sort of range of activities. We want families to be absolutely integral to everything they will eat and be in our homes with our complements. We will be using the outside spaces that we have. And as I say, in reality, for lots of people who are receiving this care, it's kind of equivalent to a hospice level of care. And so there is enough space in this home in order for people to be outside. We've got 2 outdoor spaces. We will be taking people to the parks, etc., who want that. But in reality, most people in the care home setting at the age of 87 and 89 may spend a bit of time in the garden, but really it's the great facilities inside which they will benefit from, the exceptional sort of medical equipment. We've got a small cinema, a little library in there, the great room for their family and friends to be in and to sort of share experiences. We've got activities and all these different things. And, and I suppose for a large part of the year in this country as well, the outside space is less used for all of us. So I think it's very in keeping with the community. As I say, it's gone through, the CQC, who think it will be a great development. And I just think it's a reality to be in the heart of the community where everybody wants it to be. I think this is what you have to do. And there is a 500-bed shortfall in Kensington. And,
Come on, Sarah.
There is a 500-bed shortfall in Kensington. And there's just been no development for so long. And so many of the other, the few kind of 250 beds there are specialist care. They're for people with mental health issues or behaviour issues and so forth. They're not for elderly people with dementia, with nursing needs, which is the sort of, which is such a big group of people. And with such an ageing population in Kensington, I think it works really well. And I've run over 200 homes. I came from the premier care home operator in the country, Barchester, where I ran that. And I've been part of designing this building, and I think it will work really well for the needs of the people who are in there and their families.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. I think we need to move on a bit now. Councillor O'Connor, I think you're next, and then Tom Bennett. Charles, are you? Charles, are you there?
I beg your pardon. Sorry, I had a video on, but was on mute. I beg your pardon.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead with your question. Yeah, Charles, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I have a couple of questions, and I think the first is best addressed to Mr. Henderson, probably. I'd like to understand, please, how much the building would need to be taken back at the northeast corner if it were to avoid breaching the BRE guidelines and to maintain sufficient light to all Dr. Lee's windows. That is my first question. If I could hear you on that, please.
Yes, Councillor. I think I'll bring in point to Liam Dunsford at this point, but I think the key point is that from point 2, and I think from your officer's point of view, there is an acceptable level of light that Mrs. Lee is receiving to all 3 windows. But I'll ask Liam to pick up the specific technical points in respect of the BRE guidance.
Good evening, Liam Dunford, point 2, Daylight Surveyor. In answer to your question, I think it's worth just, if I may, just frame the guidance that we're working to, the BRE guidance. This document applies and covers development for the length and breadth of the country. So if you're doing perhaps, I don't know, a barn conversion in the middle of Yorkshire Dales, it's exactly the same guidance as we work to in the middle of RBKC. So that's why it's called guidance, and nowhere in the documents use the word pass or fail. It's merely an informative to invite the, inform the planning process and case officers if the degree of loss is acceptable or not. We've gone through 2 key metrics here, the vertical sky component, this is the amount of light that falls on a window, and we've got to the conclusion, particularly with the cutbacks, that the level of light loss when referred to the VSC is minor. It's a 25% reduction. A 20% reduction is perfectly fully compliant and unnoticeable, so we just edge over the 20%. Many schemes have much more significant reductions here. Then the second is the daylight distribution. What we've got to look at this is more of an absolute test, and what it's showing is it's ignoring ignoring reflected light, and it's literally assessing at the desk height, not the quality of light, at desk height, where can and can't see the sky. And what we're left with is around 40% of the working plane, desk height, that has a direct view of the sky. And these two tests together act as an informative. So the resultant position is something that I'm very, very comfortable with to say that this is a minor impact in daylight terms. And with that VSC categorization, if this was perhaps an EIA which uses a traffic light system, minor, moderate, adverse, this would be a minor impact on the VSC. In terms of, sorry, coming back to your question, in order to make the daylight distribution pass and indeed achieve an extra 5% for that VSC, the reduction in massing would be really quite significant. And the reason for that is that the window that would be most acutely affected by this is Mrs. Lee's small kitchen window, which is very, sorry, Dr. Lee, it's interesting, you know, perhaps we could go back to the photograph in part of the case officer's presentation, which showed the key window in question. Yes, thank you. We can see the window there in the back. That's the one we're talking about. That's the one where the lion's share of the light is lost for. We have got two very large picture windows that face the courtyard that are affected to a much lesser extent. And indeed, window W11 is fully BRE compliant. And we've got that window at the back there with the shelves that have been popped across. It's designed in a very unneighbourly position directly on the boundary. And that really is quite an unusual position. So to be able to retain a VSC reduction of 25%, I think is actually exceptionally good considering where that window is placed, and it's resulted in already in a big reduction in massing. There's been 3 successive cutbacks produced over the last year through this process. So in answer to your question, it'd be quite a significant loss of massing to the rear of the property. I
suppose just looking at that photograph, the removal of the shelves might assist in getting some more light through it, but that was just an aside, perhaps a slightly facetious one. And you say W1 is fully compliant. Is W2 and W3, is it that?
Sorry, correct. There's the 25% reduction to W211, which has an oblique view towards the site, so that looks between the chapel and the new proposal. Then W311, which looks straight across the back of the site, and I think it's a great testament to the design of how it's been reduced, of the fact that a window that has an oblique view of the sky, i.e. W211, actually has the same reduction as W311. In terms of the schemes we work on, I think the cutback is very generous, and I think also if we look at the other surrounding properties where we've got the it's Adam and Eve Muse at the rear of the site, we also see that they're fully compliant. So part of this is the awkward placing of the window effectively in a party wall, in a boundary wall, which makes any reduction that much more sensitive.
Charles?
Yes.
It's Tom here. If you're about to move on to another topic, do you mind if I have a follow-up on that particular topic rather than coming back to it later?
That's fine. I wanted to ask one more question about that point, and that was whether the developers were aware of what the light impact would be from the consented scheme in 2016, I think it was, as compared to what they now propose. You may not know the answer to that, but I wonder if you do.
Yes, I do. I've got all those figures in front of me. So if we're looking at the vertical sky component for, I think, the key window W3111 in question there, as you can see, that as a existing VSC, if you like, so how much light are we getting of 27%, that then is reduced on the previously consented scheme to 23%, and on this proposed scheme, 20%. So an actual quantum change of three VSCs or 3% VSCs in my mind is not noticeable. It really is quite material in terms of the step change from the consented scheme.
And presumably W2 is similar-ish?
W2 very much so, but less so. So we're going from 13.4 existing, consented 2016 11.37, and where we are now is 10.01. So following the trend, but considerably less so material. Certainly not material.
I see. So on the scheme that could be built out in full, the light conditions would only be fractionally improved.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. That's helpful. I'm going to let Councillor Tom Bennett jump in because I think he wants to address this point. Then I'll come back with a couple more questions in a minute.
Thanks, Charles. Yeah, I just wanted on that point, so we've been talking a lot about window W3 and about VSC, but Dr. Lee in her presentation focused quite a lot on the NSL, and I mean, I suppose it depends on the person what's more important to you, but I could certainly see an argument why that would be more important. And the NSL's being decreased by over 50%, and I wouldn't have thought that W3 being sort of the smaller window has the biggest impact on the NSL for that room. So would we be able to get NSL numbers within a range that wasn't a reduction that wasn't considered material, with a much smaller reduction than what you're talking about would need to be the reduction to get W3 within appropriate VSC ranges?
So very good question. And just to reiterate, we look at the VSC and the skyline together. They tell us something quite different about how the daylight falls within that room. The cutback that I referred to from the previous councillor's question was to address the daylight distribution. It would have to be a very, very shallow and deep cutback. The reason for that is, if we again sort of draw our eyes to that photograph there, you would expect there to be a lot more light coming through W2 and W111. They look right at those windows look right to the back of the church. So there's not a great deal of light coming in there. And again, this is a test. It doesn't tell you what the quality of light is. Arguably you get the very similar numbers if you had a window the size of perhaps a keel. It's just telling you where can and can't see the sky. It doesn't tell you how much sky you can see. Yeah. So you can imagine if where the camera perhaps is here now in the lounge area, there's very little in the way of massing currently in front of that window. And if my memory serves me correct, if I was to look out of W3 111 through those shelves, I'd have almost an obstructed vista towards Abingdon mansions. So what that means is, as we're building the massing up, it's taking light away, a view of the sky from quite far away, and that daylight distribution, or that no skyline, is penetrating really quite deep into the room. Unusually so. What you would expect is there to be more light coming through W1 111, but obviously at the time it was developed, it was sort of really squeezed in there at the back of the church. So again, in answer to your question, the cutback would have to be sort of very deep and going into the scheme, effectively taking out much of the massing at the rear of the site.
So do you have the figure on what the NSL reduction was in the scheme that's already been approved?
I do. I might need 2 or 3 minutes. If you come back to me, I can just pull that number out.
Yeah, and particularly just because we're juggling a lot of figures here. So if you could get the decrease, because as I understand it, the NSL under the current proposal is decreasing by 54.1%. So if you could get the decrease for, I know I'm asking a lot of you, but if you could get the decrease for the scheme that's already approved, that would really help in my mind to compare the two. Thank you very much. Sorry, Charles, back to you.
Charles, did you have a question to somebody else?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Well, gentleman tries to locate those figures.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. A couple of questions, if I may, to Sarah Addenbrooke. I was interested in what Sarah was saying about an increase in size being sort of smuggled through under the cover of COVID. I just wanted to understand a little bit more about what she means by that, and whether I've failed to pick something up here. And I also wanted to ask Sarah about what she feels, and I'd just add she's something of an expert here, about the need for elderly care beds in the borough, and whether her view is that these are not needed, these beds.
Thank you, Charles. I think, this has been a bit of a saga, obviously, since 2016, where the council agreed to the double basement on the basis that it would be for neurological use. So that was agreed. And of course, we've then set this precedent. Then there was a consultation last year, and we were presented with a scheme which people didn't particularly like, but, in the round felt that it was okay. But then when it actually came to what was submitted, it was a different scheme. And then this all happened around COVID. So a lot of people didn't know about it. I didn't know about it, that it had actually gone in and that there was a hearing. So I just think there's a lot of people that are not very happy about the way things have gone. I mean, they made a big effort to engage with the community, with the local residents, but then things have happened which are not very palatable. With regards to sorry?
So you're not suggesting, are you, that we are considering a bigger scheme than what we deferred in April?
Yes, I think it's increased again.
Okay, I'll check that with officers in a minute.
I think it looks as though they've literally got a bicycle pump and sort of pumped it up, and they've just pushed everything out just a bit further.
I understood it had reduced by
I think there's that bit at the back, so to do with that window. But apart from that, I think they've pushed everything out a bit further.
Okay, I'll check that.
So
sorry, on the bed
side, with my day hat on, it's very difficult. We have an aging population, but what our residents say to us is that they want to remain in their homes for as long as possible. And so our policy is that we support residents to do that. We do have demand for affordable beds, but there are a number of homes that are being built at the moment which are very high end, very, very expensive. And a lot of the people in those homes are not necessarily the residents of the borough. So I question, whether we really need another high level care home. But most of our homes are under or around, sorry, I'm just looking, I've got it all in front of me. Our biggest care home is 70 beds, but at the moment we only have 44 beds in use. The others are around 26, 48, 40, 15. And if I was going to put a relative of mine in any care home in the borough, it would be the one which has 15. It is unbelievable. 43, which is the Margaret Thatcher Infirmary, and then one at 49, which is probably the one I wouldn't put my family member into. And just looking at the plans, it's very, I think there's just too many beds. There's not enough space.
Are you saying, sorry, that there's slack in all those care homes? There's space.
Yes, apart from Margaret Thatcher Infirmary, most of them have vacancies.
It's interesting. Okay, thank you very much. And one other thing that you might know the answer to, just because I don't think one of their representatives is on the line, but ESSA, the Edwards Square and Scarsdale Association, one stage I understood that, I think in April, I understood that they'd withdrawn their objection to this scheme, I thought, in its entirety. So they were perhaps neutral on the scheme, or even possibly supported it. I think the chairman of ESSA has now changed, and possibly now ESSA object again. Do you know anything about that?
Well, so I think they always objected, but they became rather resigned. But then the chairmanship, you're right, the chairmanship changed, and they do object to it. I mean, right. we would love a care home, but I personally, and this is a personal view, don't think this site is suitable for that number of beds. Yeah, it's been so important having green spaces. The only time people have been able to see their family is on one-to-one, sitting outside in the garden. With the spaces that are available there, you probably get 2 residents that might be able to see their family members. Mm. And I know, this is going to go away, but there may be another one. We just don't know.
Well, that's very helpful. Thank you. And if I may be indulged, if I may now pop back to the applicants and ask them about this. I mean, this is to the applicants. Do you are you saying that it would be unviable to build this care home without the increase in size that this scheme represents over the 2016 consented scheme? Because I'm conscious that, for example, the 2016 scheme retained the Tree of Heaven, and I don't think there was the dugout courtyard area. And although there may have been some problems with light impact to adjacent buildings, it seems that the scheme overall was significantly smaller and might have been more palatable to neighbours generally. And since it's consented and begun, there's not much that anyone can do about it. So that's a question to the applicants, please.
So I'll just quickly give up my view, and then I'll pass on to Adrian, sort of set out a bit more detail about the critical mass required, and also his experience of the previous care home, because he has got experience of that. But you know, there cannot be any further cutbacks or changes. The scheme started off with the optimum number of bedrooms for this sort of critical mass of scheme. When you're knocking down an asset and you're rebuilding it, that costs money, and that needs a certain amount of bed spaces to justify doing that. And if we want to get a social and community use on the site, this has already moved in the last 2 years from 55 bed spaces when the applicant started out, which was seen as the optimum, to 46 bed spaces now. So it's moved significantly, and I think you know, certainly Adrian will, I'm sure, confirm that there is no further room for manoeuvre on this. But I think it's probably best if Adrian talks through some of the background and problems that the previous care home had, and also how the critical mass of bedroom spaces versus communal areas works in this type of scheme.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, the previous scheme was obviously for a neurological service, which is completely different. This is for you know, a home dealing with our elderly residents in the community who are 87, 89 years of age, more hospice-like. It's a very, very different, very different feel. It honestly, you know, cannot be smaller than this size. This will be the smallest new build care home pretty much built in the country in the last decade. Nearly every care home built is of a kind of 70 plus number. For a care home to really work for people, it has to have, you know, a community in there. It has to have facilities for people, medical equipment, and all these different things. And you just, you know, they just don't run these sort of smaller services, which we're referring to in the borough, are often dealing with completely different groups. And, you know, and also we've talked here about, you know, some of the funding will come from, you know, the NHS, from local authorities for residents that come to the home. And there's also a reality that, you know, in the end, it has to be viable. And just smaller than 46 beds just can't produce a home which we would get registered on, which would give families and residents, you know, an experience, and which she could, you know, which would be, you know, economically sensible for us in reality. You know, 46 is the absolute limit. And we actually submitted a report from Professor Green, who is the Chief Executive of Care England, who's been doing so much work with the COVID situation recently, as part of the application, talking about that and putting it in contrast with care homes in the rest of the country. You know, I ran 200 homes in my previous job, and I was lucky enough to be awarded the National Care Leader of the Year. And you know, I really understand the sector, and it's just not viable to run a care home at less than 46 beds. I could just, should I touch on the empty beds you referred to while I'm just speaking?
Just briefly, because I think we need to move the discussion along, but just quickly. Yeah, I think
someone spoke, the manager of the Royal Hospital Chelsea spoke to us today and said that someone had phoned them up asking, you know, did they have empty beds, and they responded they didn't, and there's a desperate need for beds. You know, COVID-19 has had a pretty significant effect on most care homes, and it's a temporary one. There is a 500 bed shortfall in the borough, and you know, it's got pretty much the worst shortfall in the country. You know, you see modern fit for purpose facilities being constructed across the country, and I think for you know, 5+ years nothing has been built in Kensington at all. There is a desperate need, and there's very simple calculations. 15% of all people over 80 need care home beds, and there's over 3,000 residents over 85 in the borough. There is a desperate need. They're currently either struggling at home or they're going to facilities outside of the borough. I've pretty much mystery shopped all of these, or been into all of these services, and lots of them don't have good ratings either. That's a big historic issue, as you know, in the borough, which may contribute to why some of them have some empty beds. So I hope that answers that question as well.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop you there. Thank you very much. Now, Councillor Bennett, were there any points that just briefly you'd like to raise that we haven't already covered? Tom?
No, I think we've now covered everything that I was planning on raising, so I won't come up with something new just because I enjoy the sound of my own voice, even though I do. There was the applicant. One of the applicants was going to come back to us with a figure. On,
yes.
On NSL.
Yes. If that is available.
Yeah, Chair, Liam Dunford, sorry, just bouncing back with that figure. This was the comparison of the daylight distribution percentage reduction for the 2016 consent with what's now proposed. The 2016 consent had a 46% reduction in the daylight distribution, and now we're at 54. The delta between the two is, in my mind, fairly minimal. And that, again, that's confirmed by the change in the vertical sky component as well. So both of them working together on the same informative. Thank you. If that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I've just got a quick question myself at the end. I don't know, Mrs. Forsyth, are you still with us? Mary, are you still there?
Yes, good evening again.
Hi, Mary. Yeah. Hi. I'd like to ask you a question. Now, okay, I accept all of the things that you and other residents of Abingdon Court and Dr. Lee have said, but just a very narrow question. The south elevation of the proposed building has this sort of green wall proposed, in the setback area, Now, can I just ask you, just supposing, and I don't know if we're going to go down this route at all, but just supposing we ended up there, am I right in thinking from what you've written that you would prefer that green wall to be removed completely, and for that to simply be white render, as in all of the other elevations of the building? Is that right?
No, not at all, Councillor.
Right.
No, as I have said on behalf of Abingdon Court, we are utterly opposed to this because of its overmassing and height, because of the loss of the trees, the open spaces. No, if there's a misunderstanding over that, that wall, I'm not quite certain from the plans what it looks like. We just find that the whole concept is absolutely appalling. It's going to be deep. You're going to have two trees trying to grow up in darkness.
No, sorry, we're slightly at cross purposes. Okay. Maybe Sarah Gentry can go back. It's the south elevation of the proposed building, which shows this green wall. Right, here we go. Now,
yeah, but that's a cut through.
Yeah.
That is a section. You're showing a section there.
Yes. But what I'm asking you is, okay, looking at that, so you've got that sort of section of it's the back of the sort of proposed courtyard that kind of faces south to Abingdon Court. At the moment, that's a green wall. Yeah. Now, am I right in thinking that you would you would prefer that to be rendered.
Councillor, this is a cross-section. What we're looking for, we have at the moment a party fence wall. Avon House is set back beyond that, yes?
Yes.
Now, the party fence wall is going to be consumed by this massive building. So that party fence wall will become part of the actual, it will become, I'm sorry, somebody's just sending me a note. That will become part of the actual building. Now, we still own that. So what we, of course, are expecting to see, we're not going to be able to see these little people sitting down here. The wall goes straight across. That is on our side, and absolutely, we want the white wall on that side without a doubt.
Yes. But, the
wall behind it, no, we obviously they're going to put at least some greenery there if this goes through. Is that clear? So the part.
Okay. So the wall, all right. So in other words, okay, and I stress we may or may not go down this route at all. No. I'm just saying that as you say, this is a section. It's not the boundary wall between the site and Abingdon Court. This is a section. This is, if you like, this is a kind of flank wall within the proposed Avon House. And you're saying you're indifferent as to whether that is a green wall or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll be very lucky if we have something there at all. But absolutely, well, no, Councillor, any green, we want as much greener as possible. Okay, and you've got 2 trees. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you very much. And my apologies. Maybe I didn't express that particularly well, my question, but no, that's good. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, well, colleagues, I think we've had a chance to question the objectors and applicant. I think we now thank everyone who's spoken as members of the public or the applicant. And I think we now move on to consider questions to officers. So this is just members of the committee asking questions of officers. So I think, Walla, I think you've put your, you said you'd like to ask the first question. So Walla, why don't you go ahead and then Mo next? Walla.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have 2 questions. One is, I don't know if I missed it, but did we do a daylight sunlight effect on the church because of the building? Do we have a daylight sunlight report on the church, on the effect of the building on the church?
I think maybe Sarah Gentry, perhaps would you like to address that?
No, the daylight sunlight report focuses on the residential properties. It doesn't include the impact on the church.
But does it include the impact on the community use? Because that side of the church is predominantly used by the community.
Yes, I mean it is used by the community, and yes, I certainly can see that the impact on daylight sunlight is potentially a consideration. Yeah. However, the guidance that's contained within specifically on daylight and sunlight focuses very much on residential properties, which is why it wasn't included. There are obviously windows facing onto the site on the church, but there are also windows at the front which would not be affected by the development. We didn't feel it was necessary to require a specific study on that. Derek, I don't know if you want to add to that response.
Well, Chairman, I don't really have much to add to that, only just to stress that the focus of the BRE guidelines is very firmly on residential accommodation. And that's not to say that the impact on the church is not a material consideration, because it is a material consideration, but it's definitely not the focus of the guidelines. And I think there would have to be quite a marked effect on the functionality of the church that could be demonstrated before that could be elevated to being a strong planning concern.
And we don't, and as it stands, we don't see it as something to be concerned about, do we?
In town planning terms,
yes,
based upon our policies and based upon the BRE guidelines, I'd suggest that the impact on the church wouldn't be a concern. No, that there simply isn't the evidence or the policy or guideline basis to regard that as a town planning concern.
Okay, thank you. My second question is with us as a borough moving towards carbon neutral, why wasn't that one of the focuses we had in when we're guiding the developers into putting their plans together? Why wasn't that something crucial? Because 2030 is, as I said, is just around the corner. And by the time this building is built, it will be, I don't know, maybe just a few years before 2030 or something. So if we want to be carbon neutral by then, wouldn't it be advisable that every new building need to be, done within that in mind?
Yes, I can respond to that. Yes, it was a focus at the very early stages of within our pre-application and within the application at the early stages. We asked for further information from the applicants to try and encourage them to explain why they were unable to reach the standards. And that's something that we have been partially, the information that they have provided has helped to partially explain that. I think as the applicant explained, it is more difficult than I would have expected because of the particular use. That it's surprising that they've explained that even with lighting, for example, that needs to, it can't be on a sensor with an elderly person's home. It needs to be on because of a safety point of view. So the requirements were a lot higher than, and it is more difficult than I would expect. But we have, I think we recognise the importance of this. Our policies recognise the importance of this. So because of that, there is this requirement within the legal agreement, which would require them to submit a revised energy statement that would enable us to just to look at that again and just make sure that we are completely satisfied that they have achieved all that they possibly can do on this site.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bakhtiar.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to ask the officers about the outdoor space and the size. Is this something material? So we know that the outdoor space is very small, even though the applicant explained that they will provide other services on site. But to me, it looks like the outdoor space in a place like this is very, very important to have for visitors. We will have 46 rooms or more. Imagine 10 families visiting their relatives one afternoon. So could we do something about this, or is this acceptable?
Yes, I can respond, Sarah Gentry. Yes, I it is something that we can consider, but we have really very much taken on board the fact that this scheme has been considered by the Quality Care Commission, who are the experts on the requirements for accommodation such as this. And as a result of that advice, the scheme was changed, and they have included an additional terrace area to the rear of the site. So we have, since it has been considered adequate by the Quality Care Commission, we have given that quite a lot of weight, because they are the experts in this, as I say, in this type of accommodation, as what is necessary and desirable.
Does that mean if we have a different view, we will be going against their view as experts?
Yes, I think we would need to be sure why we felt that this particular case was different and that it needed more outdoor space than the recommended.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Charles, are you there? You've got a question.
Yes, thank you very much. It was just to check that point that I asked Sarah Addenbrooke about with Sarah Gentry. Now, has this scheme increased in size since what we considered in April?
No, it hasn't. I will just bring slides up which show the bulk of the scheme. With the deferred scheme, you will see at the bottom of the slide. So that was the scheme that was considered in April, and then the proposed scheme here.
So the only change is a reduction?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Bennett, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This point on viability. So we received a representation from an objector saying that there was a study done that said sort of smaller sub 40 room care homes can make an equivalent sort of percentage profit as more than 40, and we heard from Councillor Addenbrooke that there's a number of sub 40 care homes in the borough, but then we also heard from the applicant that I think he said sort of care homes under 40 or under 46 aren't really being built anymore, and they didn't think it was viable. I was just wondering, did the council take a position on that? Is that something we looked into in significant detail, the viability of a smaller care home?
We didn't look into the viability in terms of asking for financial information to be submitted to us. It is something that we did have a lot of discussions about and asked the applicant for figures to really to back up their position, and the response of the numbers of the recent care homes and the size of those was their response to that. And I suppose we did give quite a lot of weight to that, if the fact that smaller care homes are not being built at the moment.
And there's probably a question I should have asked the applicant, but the one that's currently approved, the neurological one, why they obviously thought it was viable when they applied for planning. Why is that no longer viable? Change in demand, or?
Yes, I think that it was a very specialist facility. So it obviously was rather different to what is now proposed. And I believe that there was an end user in mind at the time, but that didn't come into reality. And I know that the site was marketed to other care home users on the basis of that original consent, to see whether someone would take it on with that original consent, and there wasn't interest in that,
or at least not the price they were asking for.
Well, maybe. I mean, that's that's.
Well, I know. I'm not. I appreciate it. It's a very difficult one to come down on, and it, to some extent, it's one word against another. The approval of the second basement. I know that that was approved in the previous scheme, but it is unusual in this borough. Was that linked to again their representations that it wouldn't be viable without that, without those additional bedrooms?
Yeah, it was in the previous scheme. The basement was very much required for the additional facilities that were needed for that neurological centre. So it was slightly different than this current proposal, because bedrooms were not proposed at that lower level.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Great. Well, now, colleagues, we are going to need to make a decision. Are there any final questions you'd like to pose to officers just at this stage? Is there anything that immediately springs to mind? If not, I think I'll move forward. I mean, I think this particular application, I think there are, it's a fair size site, and there's a lot going on here. But I think if we try and focus on the planning issues here, there are actually only a relatively small number of issues in truth. And the reason I say that is that I know many people have focused, for example, on who actually owns the site, things like that. They're not really planning matters at all. And also the fact is that the site, it does have an existing planning permission which has been implemented, and in planning terms we have to take account of those matters. I mean, to my mind, the planning balance is as follows. On the positive side for the scheme is that the provision of care homes in the borough is something it's supported by policy. That's straightforward. It should be viewed as a significant benefit of the scheme. The other aspect, which is a positive, is that we have to think about the current building, which I think could not possibly be viewed as contributing positively to the conservation area. And obviously the new building, you might like it, might not. You might feel that it's not as good as the previous scheme's proposed building. That's fine. But I think overall, having a new building there of the sort that's proposed would have to be viewed as a positive. On the negative side, we have heard from Dr. Lee and also representations from other neighbours, and clearly there is an impact on the living conditions of neighbours, principally daylight and sunlight, and that is the factor that I think is against the proposal in front of us, and that's really the balance that we have to try and make a decision about this evening. So I think it is difficult. What I think I will do is I'd like to go down the table, metaphorically, and ask colleagues how they are sort of minded. So this isn't a formal vote. I'm just asking you to say if you've got formed a particular view and what you're sort of minded to do about this application. And now I'm going to go in sort of reverse alphabetical order. So, well, as chairman, I've spoken first, but I'm going to go back up the list. So, Councillor O'Connor, Charles, what are your thoughts about this? How do you feel?
Thank you very much, James. I think you've given a very fair and balanced assessment of what the planning issues are, and reminded us that there are other issues that, whilst they matter greatly to people, can't really be taken into account from a planning perspective. I think where I've just about got to is that were we to reject this scheme, we'd be rejecting it on the basis of the excessive massing and the effect that would have on light and neighbours, and I think in this instance the developers have sought to address that, and I think that what they have done has significantly mitigated the negative effects that were associated with the previous scheme. They have improved matters, and we have to remember that having in dense city centre living, there is always this cheek by jowl effect of relatively big buildings close to other relatively big buildings. And I think in this instance of the church, clearly a very beautiful listed building with those lovely big Georgian windows, that it feels bad that the proposed building next door to it may block some of the light to that. But I see in my own ward churches where there are very large buildings next door, and that's just part of city centre life. And so I think the conclusion I've reached is that the benefits proposed just very slightly outweigh the disbenefits and the harm that may be caused to certain neighbours, and so I think I am going to support the scheme overall.
So you're inclined to support the scheme.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you for that. Councillor Idris, how do you feel about, how are you minded about this?
This is a heart and mind situation. My heart wants much more outside space, less overlooking on the church side, and more light for Dr. Lee's living space, and of course for the whole thing to be carbon neutral. But my mind says, in April, we asked the applicant to reduce the bulk, and they did, maybe slightly, less than anybody expects or wanted maybe, but they did nonetheless. We asked them to do something about the daylight, sunlight for Dr. Lee's flat, and they did. They improved the quality slightly. And we asked them to set the building back a little bit, and they also did that. So while there are 137 objections to this application, in planning terms, and being an application that was deferred once and were asked to go back and look at certain things, I think the applicant has achieved that. So will it be my heart or my mind? I guess we'll find out when we vote.
Right. Well, thank you for that comment. Councillor Bennett, how are you minded about this?
Well, Chairman, I mean, there's obviously a strong case against, which is that well, it brings in a double basement for additional rooms. We don't usually approve double basements in this borough. Albeit that there was one approved in the previous scheme, but as someone mentioned, that was for a very specific different use. So is it appropriate to approve it again for this different use? You know, that's a case against it. It removes a tree which provides material benefit to amenity of neighbours. So that's obviously against it, and the sunlight is an enormous decrease. So I know they've improved the situation slightly, but the NSL was going to be decreased by 55.9%. It'll now still be decreased by 54.1%. So, you know, less than half what they had. One of the windows will now get no winter light. And the previous scheme that was approved was a decrease of 46%. Now, there's still a lot, but there's still quite a difference, to my mind, between 46 and 54. But that being said, we definitely need a new building on this site. The current one there is a significant negative impact on the area, and it's empty. It's not being put to good use. We need a good building. So it boils down to the viability. Is the viability argument, at least to me at least, is it strong enough? Is it true that no other care home can be built here? And I'm not sure that the applicant has done enough to convince me that that is the case. He says, you know, smaller care homes aren't built nowadays. Also, there's a question of the size of the rooms, because we saw evidence in our papers that 115% increase in massing or in floor space is being put in to achieve just a 31% increase in number of beds over what was on the site previously. So, and not long ago, you know, they applied for the neurological centre, which was significantly smaller. So it's a very close call, but I'm not convinced that the viability argument is strong enough to overcome all the negative elements that I just described.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Vactia, how do you see this?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I know the council approved, the committee approved the previous application, but I am bringing this back to prove one thing. I think the reason, as Councillor Addenbrook explained eloquently, that the reason for approving the double basement on this site was to be used as a neurological center. Now, the applicant is allowed to change their mind or do something since they started some work in there. We can't do very much. We cannot reverse that. But allowing this application as it stands, with this very small amount of outdoor space in my mind, is abuse of the system. If they want to do a proper care home, they should have a proper plan, and they should have a proper outdoor space for visitors. I am very unhappy, and its impact on the church, even though the church is not covered by this. In my view, churches, like mosques and temples, and they are community centers, they are serving the communities. It should be taken in consideration. And then the negative impact, in my view, outweighs the benefits. So I am not very happy with this application.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much indeed. Okay, so I think I know where we might be going. So I'm now going to call for a formal vote. The recommendation in front of us, obviously the officer recommendation, is to grant, obviously with the Section 106 agreement that is outlined. So I will do this in order. So Councillor Bakhtiar, are you in favour of the recommendation?
Chairman, I'm very sorry to interrupt. It's the legal officer. Can I just point out that the recommendation, which is on paragraph 1.9 of the original report, there's just one change to it, which is the legal agreement.
Yes.
The date of May the 5th, 2020 is now the 29th of October 2020.
Yes, sorry, that's understood, yes.
And there was also that amendment to the condition that Sarah Gentry pointed out right at the start, at the end of her presentation.
Yes. No, the details of the Section 106 agreement obviously have changed, because this is clearly reconsideration of an application. Yeah, that's understood.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's right. Not at all. That's absolutely correct. So, Councillor Bakhtiar, so the recommendation would be to grant. Can I ask, are you in favour or against that recommendation?
I am against, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Bennett?
I'm against the recommendation, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Idris?
I am for the recommendation.
Okay. Councillor O'Connor?
I'm for the recommendation.
Okay. All right. So I think it's very difficult for me. I think perhaps on balance, the case against, based on amenity for neighbours, is just about made, I think, to my mind. So rather reluctantly, I am against. So on that basis, the recommendation is defeated. Now we have to then move on, and obviously officers can advise me about this. We need to agree why we have not agreed the recommendation and what the reasons for refusal are. Now, to my mind, this is actually relatively straightforward. I think that we have acknowledged the benefits of the scheme, as we have discussed earlier, of the care provision, and also the benefit to the conservation area of having a new building in place of the current one. But on balance, we have decided that the impact on the living conditions of neighbouring properties, now that obviously includes all the properties, but in particular, I feel, and obviously in this discussion we have to think about the way that a planning inspector might consider all of these matters. I think in particular the impact on the living conditions of 16 Allen Street, I think, is the most significant. Now, officers, if I can ask for your assistance, is there anything further that you would feel that we should add to that?
Chair, sorry, can I comment on? Can we also consider the overlooking? If we're going to reject this application, then can we consider the overlooking from the church? So the bedrooms on the church side. I mean, in my opinion, if we have a larger space between, if you move the wall a little bit, and maybe on the church side, not to have overlooking bedrooms.
No, I mean, I feel, I hear what you say, but personally, I feel that I think, okay, the church is a neighbour of the site, and that's fine, and it's perfectly right to include that. But I think we have to be quite careful, because I think, strictly speaking, the church has a much lower status than actually someone's home in terms of daylight, sunlight, overlooking those sort of things. So I don't really think specific reference to the church, but I'm afraid I don't think that's not something that is justifiable. I mean, I'm very maybe one of the officers would like to comment here.
I was thinking about overlooking the bedrooms from the church, so people in the church looking at the vulnerable patients in the bedrooms. That's what I was thinking about, not the other way around. Not the patients looking at the church. Is the church people looking at the patients or at the residents?
No, I think actually, I think inside that church, the windows we're talking about that face the site are actually quite high up. I don't think in practice nobody would be looking into anybody. I don't think that's actually an issue, in fact. So Sarah Gentry, what do you make of this? What do you think about potential reasons for refusal that I've outlined?
Yes, I think that the impact on the living conditions of neighbouring properties, it's a harmful impact on living conditions of neighbouring properties, in particular the impact on 16 Allen Street, would be a fair reason for refusal. The use of the word in particular enables us to also consider the impact on the properties in Abingdon Court as well within that.
Okay. All right. Okay. Tell me, officers, if I can ask generally, is there anything else that we need to be? I mean, obviously there will be a detailed discussion potentially about conditions. I mean, I would have thought that residents have made it very, very clear that they wish all of the elevations of the building to be rendered and painted white. And I think that's something that we would take on board, but that's not a reason for refusal. I think that's for something for us to bear in mind if were there to be an appeal or another application. Okay, so in that case, if officers are happy that this is a sensible reason for refusal, I would wish to propose that. And Tom, Councillor Bennett, can I ask you to second that because we need to have a motion that is that is proposing that these are the reasons to refuse. So Tom, are you happy to second that?
Yes, happy to second that, Chair. All
right, thank you. All right, so I propose the motion that the application is refused for the reasons that we've just discussed. So can I go down the committee to ask if people are happy to go along with those as the reasons for refusal? Councillor Bakhtiar, are you in favour of those reasons for refusal?
Yes, Chairman. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett?
Yes, Chair.
Great. Councillor Idris?
Okay, sorry, can you repeat the reasons for refusal again, please?
Yes, certainly. The reasons for refusal are that we decide that on balance, although we acknowledge the benefits of the scheme, we have decided that on balance, these are not outweighed by the impact on neighbouring properties, in particular 16 Allen Street. Okay, so you in favour of that resolution?
Councillor Husband, could I just come in and just say that I would just add to that the relevant policies, so it would be.
Of course. The detailed wording obviously is something that officers write out in full, and we are in the meeting. We are giving the substance of what our decision is. Obviously, the exact wording is something which officers need to need to finalise for us. Yeah. So, Councillor Idris, are you in favour of those reasons for refusal?
Well, since I agreed earlier. I mean, can I support the motion now? Legally?
Yes, of course you can.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm in favour. Okay.
All right. And Councillor O'Connor.
So I'm against the motion for refusal.
Okay. All right. Well, that's entirely reasonable, and I am in favour. So the reasons for a refusal are agreed by 4 votes to 1. Councillor O'Connor has voted against. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much indeed, everybody. I think that with that decision, that concludes our meeting this evening. Thank you very much, everyone. And just very quickly, as ever, thank you to the officers who we haven't heard of working behind the scenes, who've made this meeting possible this evening.
Indeed.
So, yes, thank you. Thank you to them. And on that basis, that closes the meeting. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much.